Hello and welcome to Stratola Spectrum. I'm your host, Dinesh Chandrasekhar, Chief Analyst and CEO of Stratola. In this episode, we're going to be talking about agentic automation and integration. The convergence of these two areas is hot and prominent right now, with enterprise workflows becoming more and more rampant across the agentic space. Joining me today is a very, very special guest, Massimo Pezzini, ex-Gartner analyst who had been with Gartner for the last 2, 3 decades. And currently he is the head of research at Workato. I've been a big fanboy of Massimo. I've followed his work over the years. I've worked with him. He's one of those analysts that has absolute clarity on the tech industry, particularly the application integration space. He was one of the very first authors of Integration Platform as a Service, iPaaS. It is with great pleasure that I'm having Massimo join me on this particular episode. And so, Massimo, welcome to the episode.
Thank you, Dinesh, and thank you for inviting me.
Appreciate it. So I want to kick off this episode a little bit lighter. I know that you've been doing your Coffee with Massimo episodes on your own as well. I have been a big fan. I've been watching those series. And what I want to ask you is not about coffee, but about wine. Given that I know that you love wine as well, I want to know what's your favorite varietal, when you go for a Friday evening type of a wine, what is it that you go for?
Yeah, let's say that white Burgundy, you can't go wrong normally. But I also like a lot the Italian, especially the red wines, the Barolo, the Montalcino. I love Brunello de Montalcino. But I also love Bordeaux. I love Côte d'Iron. So I'm pretty eclectic. Let's say I don't really have a preferred wine. It depends. If I eat, I don't know, meat, I go for this one. If I have a shellfish, I go for the other one, etc. But generally speaking, with me, you can't go wrong if you offer me a glass of white Burgundy.
Yeah, okay, nice, very nice, very nice. Yeah, my favorite definitely is a Barolo for sure. I think I love the Red Bull dry varieties for sure, so that's very nice. Well, with that out of the way, let's get started with the thing that we want to talk about. In one of your recent episodes, you spoke quite a bit about the evolution of process orchestration, how it has gone from the traditional application integration days and all that into the more agentic world that we are entering into, right?
Yeah.
So if I were to ask you about this evolution of how you see it from your vantage point, what do you think is the most significant thing that is happening right now? Of course, the agents, of course, right? But how has that changed the realm of process orchestration? What are the possibilities that you see have evolved that were not possible before?
Yeah, well, this is, as you know, Dinesh, I've been tracking this market for a long, long time. It's almost 30 years. So I have seen, this market evolving from managed file transfer all the way to agentic, right? So a lot of things have happened. But what is interesting is that the progression of technology in this space always was incremental. There never was really a revolution, something revolutionary changing the rules of the game. It was more technology, broader set of capabilities, etc., but no big revolution. I think that when it comes to the combination of agentic and orchestration, automation technology, we are probably going to go through some sort of a revolution, right? In the sense that, all the technology that we have had so far, RPA, BPM, and enterprise service buses and API management, et cetera, is really great technology which helps organization automate their deterministic processes. Same input, same output.
Yep.
That's my simple definition of what a deterministic process is.
Yep.
But variance, of course, but at the end of the day, same input, same output. And this is, of course, needed. Think about compliance, for example. Same input, same output. Otherwise you break the compliance rules, etc. But we all know that there are a lot of processes and issues and tasks which are not deterministic. In other words, the same input can deliver different outputs,
Mm-hmm.
depending on the history of what happened, depending on the context, et cetera, right? So I believe that at the end of the day, the combination of agent technology and traditional integration automation stuff will give us a unique opportunity to actually automate these non-deterministic type of processes. Think about, I don't know, something like employee onboarding or a sales process. You know, sales process is not really a deterministic process. It would be nice if it were, but it is not, right? So those are processes which they have a beginning and an end, right? And we have a goal to meet.
Yep.
Sell this particular product to this particular customer, or have this order being fulfilled. But in order to get from here to there are multiple ways, and we have to deal with unexpected situations, things that may not play out as we would like.
Yeah.
So I think that agent technology in combination with integration technology will help us automate these type of processes.
Yeah. And I like how you separated out the agentic world with the integration world, because I think that is the key thing that I want to talk to you about today. But before we get into that, you also touched on some of the relevant technologies that we've been already used to, right? Application integration, RPA, BPM, and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
I've traveled that journey with you over the last 20 years across like various companies. And as a matter of fact, my Twitter handle is still AppInt for all, which is like application integration for all. So it's like that rooted is how I've been like with the application integration space. I know we have kind of evolved that, and you wrote the founding papers about iPaaS and all that, and you've seen the evolution of that particular space. But are these technologies actually evolving, or are they getting sunset and we are seeing something radically new with every phase that is coming about, right? For example, RPA, people are talking about RPA is dead because like agents are in and all that. I mean, I've seen this kind of like hype every time something new comes about, and then they say old technology is dead. And then I go to some of these financial institutions, the banks and places like those, and RPA is like very much alive. They are still using it, right? So how do you see it, in terms of that evolution? Does one kill the other, or is it like more of like, complementary, augmenting things?
That before doing what I'm doing right now, I was a Gartner analyst for many, many years. And I remember the very first days of me as a Gartner analyst back in '96. At the time, the mainframe was declared dead. Remember that? Go to a big bank, go to a big retailer, mainframe is still there, right? So, this is a joke I use all the time. The word was created in 6 days because there was no install base, right? So RPA, people, they have automated massive, big processes using RPA, and they won't get rid of that solution anytime soon, right? So that's one consideration. We as IT people, we are always enthusiastic about the new thing, and we believe that the new thing is going to kill the old thing. It rarely happens. Very, very rarely happens. Sometimes it happens, but very rarely happens, right? Normally, new technology builds on top of existing technology, right? So, for example, speaking about Agentic, we are going to build agents, but those agents, they need to interoperate and trigger actions into our SAP ERP systems, in our Salesforce CRM system, in our billing system, in our core banking system, et cetera, et cetera. So, what I have seen is, as I was saying at the beginning, it's accumulation of technologies, right? So, in my opinion, what they have seen over the past many years is the following. Integration is about 3 fundamental problems: making sure that data are synchronized. You don't want to have customer name and address and marital status and fiscal code, and which is different in your ERP system and your CRM system. You want to be consistency. The second problem is automating processes. You have an end-to-end process cutting across multiple different systems, maybe humans in the loop, and you want to automate the process end-to-end. And the third one is what we call composition or APIs, exposing APIs out of pre-existing systems maybe, and leveraging those APIs to build maybe new applications. Right? This is the basic of integration. This is what it is, right? And over the years, we have seen technologies emerging to address those specific use cases, right? So if you think about data integration technology, ETL, ELT, data virtualization, data synchronization, etc. At the end of the day, they have been designed to solve the first problem, the data consistency problem, right? If you look at BPM, RPA, business process automation, to a certain extent, B2B gateways, process automation, this is what they do, right? And if you look at ESBs and API management and, event brokers, to a certain extent, they are meant to support composition.
Correct.
Now, the problem, therefore, it means that if you really want to solve all your problem as a company, you have to have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different platforms. So what I have seen over the past, let's say, 10 years, is convergence. More and more, we have products in the marketplace, especially iPaaS. iPaaS is to some extent the kind of the catalyst for this convergence. Adding more and more capabilities so that now we have platforms which you can think of them as sort of a integration, automation, Swiss Army knives.
Yeah.
Right? They can do app integration, data integration, process automation, B2B, API, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one thing which is happening, right? And this is driven by multiple factors, vendors. Of course, vendors, let's say you are a integration vendor, right? And you have 5,000 customers. What is very natural for you is to expand your portfolio to sell more to these 5,000 customers rather than trying to win net new customer. We all know that winning a new customer is much more expensive than upselling or cross-selling to an existing customer.
Right.
So that's the vendor consideration. There is the customer consideration. I speak all the time with customers which they have 6 or 7 different platforms. Some of them are very old. Some of them are maybe going out of support. They are reaching the end of life, etc. And they want to simplify and rationalize this thing.
Right.
So they look for platforms that maybe cannot support 100% of their needs, but they can support maybe 70, 60% of their needs. This is especially true in mid-sized organizations, but also in large organizations. I see this all the time, right? So vendor kind of pressure, customer needs on the other end.
Right.
And so from a market segmentation point of view, I think we are going towards some sort of a simplification. Traditionally, I look at this integration automation market as split into 10 segments. iPaaS, managed file transfer, B2B gateway, API management, event brokers, et cetera, ESBs, etc.
Right.
Maybe in 3, 4 years' time, 50% of them will be irrelevant or will be very small or just maintenance fundamentally.
Right.
So we are going toward a simplification of the landscape from a technology perspective.
Right.
And then we have AI coming in, right? And I used to say that integration and AI are in symbiotic relationship, right? Meaning that integration enables AI and AI enables integration. What do I mean by that?
Spot on.
AI integration enables AI because, as you and I know, AI is great.
As good as the data, and if you don't have all the right data.
AI is great, but if you don't have the data, it's useless. And it is much more valuable if it's injected, if you want, in the business processes, right? AI standalone is great, but AI as a part of the business process is much better, right? So that's one aspect when I say integration enables AI. The other one is that, all the vendors I know are trying to leverage Gen AI and agents, et cetera, to simplify the use of their platform, make it easier to use, more reliable, more performant, easier to manage, easier to use, blah, 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 et cetera, right? So which means that going forward, integration platform will be much more reliable, stable, greater quality of service, et cetera, more secure, more governable, if this is an English word, I don't know, and also easier to use, right? So the learning curve for this platform is going to shorten quite significantly because of AI. If we go back 15 years, 20 years, the early days of ESBs, and we look at modern iPaaS, the learning curve already shortened quite significantly because of low code, right? Now with AI, it's going to shorten further. meaning that integration, which always was a necessary evil for the few.
Yeah.
Normally, when I used to speak with CIOs, they said, "Do you have an integration team?" Oh, let me think. Oh yeah, we have a team of 6 down in the basement, and they do
Down in
some
the basement.
stuff. I don't know exactly what they do, but we have. Now I think that because of AI and low code and everything else, this is going to be much more democratized than I used to say. Right? So
I agree.
business users will be
I
able
agree.
to use AI-enabled integration automation tools to sort out their, local, personal or team integration
Yeah.
aspect.
I
So
mean,
as
you
I said,
mentioned
I
like
see this as an evolution, not really as a dramatic change, even though I expect that somebody will come out with some maybe native AI agent-based technology to drastically simplify or change the way in which certain aspects of integration
right,
technology.
right. I mean, you spoke about like 3 or 4 different key themes here, and I really love, or maybe I would want to like double click on each one of those. The first one you spoke about convergence, right? So how the industry is like converging, or the integration technologies are like converging. Vendors wanting to add in more and more capabilities because they want to like upsell into their customer base and all that. I think it's a very valid point, and I feel because of competitive pressures as well that they would want to like keep adding more and more features, because they don't want to be left out, don't miss the piece of the market share and all that. In the same vein, now that AI has come about, do you see RPA vendors adding on capabilities like agents and things like that to augment or complement what they're already offering? And does that change their core competency from who they are to what they're now going to be offering?
This is for sure for RPA vendor. This is for sure, a fair statement for iPaaS vendors. This is for sure a fair statement as far as API management vendors, etc. Right? Because and the primary goal is to simplify the development process. And when I say development process, that just don't mean building the RPA robot or building the integration flow or building the API. I also mean documenting this stuff. If there is one thing that we all know is that
Yeah,
software developers, they hate the documentation. They don't want to do it. So
yeah,
think about a Gen AI tool which looks into your code, let's say your process flow, and documents it, put it in, creates a human readable document that you can read in order to understand what it is. You are an integration expert, so you know that 50-60% of the effort in the integration process is testing.
yep,
Right? So we
yep.
can think about using AI to shrink, to shorten, to simplify the testing process, right? And maintenance. So there is a lot of stuff that AI technology is doing right now. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is, of course, that agent technology changes the way in which you think at applications, right? So what is an application in an agentic world? It's a bunch of agents working together, right? But when you design the agent, maybe they are not designed from the get-go to work together, right?
Right.
So I would say the following: the foundational technologies, the classic good old integration automation foundation technology, is probably going to remain the same. It has to evolve a little bit to make interoperability between agents a little easier than it is today. But what is really going to be radically different is the way in which organizations have to think about applications and processes, right?
Right.
So, I believe that the next generation of application software is going to be built by composing, aggregating multiple semi-independent components together in original ways in order to implement your own solution. So that's
That's
the
very
net
cool.
impact of all this AI agent kind of technology, right? So I can figure next generation of application being a bunch of APIs coming from legacy systems, a bunch of agents doing certain things, maybe some chatbots or maybe devices, and robots, etc., being orchestrated together, in order to build the solution for you, for your company, right? And this is a very different way of thinking and building applications, I guess.
Right. I agree. You spoke about the three critical areas when it comes to like integration, right? So you said data consistency, and then you said automation and composition, right? Predominantly in today's world with agentic, innovations or announcements coming about, most of them are like in the middle segment, which is about automation, right? So they're trying to focus on how quickly can I leverage an agent to automate this and that. Again, it could be like deterministic, non-deterministic workflows, and most of them seem to be almost deterministic because that's kind of like the easy thing to say. Okay, now feed the agent, delivers this kind of a thing, right? So it's like almost in a very predictable way. Composition wise, do you see, I mean, you just now said like the future looks like, more composable applications and all that, right? So I really love that idea. I think, we'll table that for a later question. But on the data side, do you see data vendors starting to adopt agents to offer more such innovations where it enables integrations or agents to be more effective? Because most of the innovations that are coming out of the data vendors these days are write your own queries by using natural language, very simple ways to say that, right? So that's like, okay, I want look at all the customer data for the 6 months in this particular geography filtered by blah, blah, blah. And then you say it in English and then it translates that to SQL and, that executes. That's kind of like the quick, easy win for some of these data vendors. Have you seen any other innovations on the data side, or are you predicting something to happen on that side that might make this agentic workflows, composable applications more easier?
Well, let's say that, of course, composable applications imply data, so a big part of a big challenge when it comes to building composable applications is to have a solid data architecture, data infrastructure underneath, right? So from that perspective, I believe that agent technology can be very helpful in terms of making available tools and capabilities to consume those data, but also tools and capabilities to govern those data, security, all these kind of things. I believe in many, many cases, a number of challenges associated with data can be sorted out through AI technology. My favorite example, right? Governance or security, if you prefer, right?
Okay.
You can define security policies. The security policies are this and this and this and this and this and this. How do you know whether those security policies that you wrote on a piece of paper have been effectively and concretely implemented? You have no idea, right? So what about having AI agents going around and checking, whether the security policies that you defined, that the CISO of the company defined, have been properly implemented? Yeah.
Security
What about
audit
having
agents.
agents going around? Exactly, sort of a auditing agent, right? Same for governance, or data governance. Same, you can have whatever, data governance policies, but how do you know it was properly implemented, right? The same applies to maybe security detection, by analyzing network traffic and data patterns, et cetera, you can identify suspicious behaviors, if you wish, from a security perspective, et cetera. So yes, I think the only limitation is fantasy, imagination, because there are many ways. The art of the possible. There are many ways in which these technologies can be effectively leveraged. Now, of course, vendors are primarily focusing on the development side of things because it's the most visible. How do you make a demo about security, compliance, whatever? But I believe that the impact is going to be much more profound than just providing a bunch of copilots to help you build queries or dashboards faster. Yes.
Very nice. So to the other question that we just tabled, which is the composable application side, right? Right now, APIs seem like the default way for most of these interactions. Even agents to interact with some of these applications, APIs seem like a very easy way to like do that right now. But in the future, do you still see APIs existing the same way, or adapting, evolving, because agents need much more or a different way of communication, I would say, right? Let me give you an example. I keep calling these little agentic bubbles that I see, where ServiceNow creates its own set of, agents. Snowflake creates its own set of agents. Everybody is like having their own sets of agents, which serves the purpose within their ecosystem, which is good, right? But when you consider an enterprise workflow, suddenly you're talking about a workflow that spans across these different systems where communication needs to happen. And it may not be like one orchestration seamlessly. It may be like a non-deterministic workflow where an agent needs to like suddenly access Snowflake data and it needs to communicate with the agent on the Snowflake side, right? What does that communication look like? Are there like protocols already defined? Do you know if like the current API models would like thrive and exist in that same way, or is that going to evolve is my question.
Your illustration of the problem is spot on. I see this coming, organization will have tons and tons of agents, some of them SAP agents, Salesforce agents, ServiceNow agents, et cetera, et cetera. How do you make them work together?
Yeah.
That's the perennial challenge. To my knowledge, there is no standard protocol available that will make this interoperability seamless. There are attempts, Boomi is trying to do something, and Anthropic, they're proposing another protocol, which is agent to enterprise system communication. Workday is working. So there are activities going on, right? So
And I
but
know of a few standards in the open source world as well that are, working on as well, which is something.
Right. Exactly right. So I think the jury's still out in terms of what's going to be the winning standards. I have no idea, sincerely. As always, is going to be the most popular, not necessarily the best from a technical standpoint. But they all tend to be based on APIs, mechanisms, right? However, I agree with you that good old REST APIs or open API kind of things may not be sufficient, because an API, is you have the open API specification telling you what the API is all about. But the question is, how would an agent figure out what this API is all about, right? So I think that a human knows, because he can call somebody and ask questions, etc. An agent may be not so simple for an agent. So I believe that those agent inter-agent interoperability protocols will be based on APIs. I suppose also will be based on events, because not necessarily agent to agent needs to be synchronous, can be asynchronous. I'm an agent doing certain things. I delegate another agent to do this, to continue the work for me. And this is event-based interaction, is not a request reply classic. Okay. But the point I'm making is that those interfaces, whether APIs or events, etc., must be much more explicit in terms of what they do, right? So they must be extended with some sort of description what the API is all about, so that an agent can figure out, yes, I need this type of capability, and this guy there can provide me with this capability.
Right.
Now, moving forward, maybe we will completely change the paradigm. There was a Gartner colleague who 4 or 5 years ago, he wrote a research note which said, your application will talk to each other in English, right? So in other words, maybe in the future, natural language will be the way in which agents will talk to each other. But for the time being, I believe that what we really need is standard protocols and much more explicit, much more, much more understandable type of API.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've heard of like, cases where agents can read like Swagger API and Swagger for the API and all that, and they actually understand what the API does and all that. But you're right. I mean, it's like a predefined contract almost.
Exactly.
And going forward, I think it needs to be a little bit more on the side of being able to handle unpredictable, non-deterministic kind of interactions like that as well. So what if the agent on the Snowflake side suddenly says, okay, I've got this extra data that I'm also going to give you. How will this agent handle it? How will it understand it? And you're right. Being explicit about those kinds of um, interactions, I think would be really beneficial.
Yeah. Basically, an API will have to publish some sort of a manifest, basically describing what it is. Maybe in plain natural language, right? But in other words, API must become much more discoverable than they are today. Today, if you want to discover an API, you have to have a catalog. And the catalog, there is a description of the API you can discover in that way. That paradigm needs to be expanded in order to enable agent-to-agent communication, I guess.
Nice. Let me ask you about like what you do on a day-to-day basis as well. You currently are a strategic advisor at Workato. So tell us a little bit about Workato and the role that you do there as well.
Well, basically at Workato, I do what I used to do at Gartner. I look at market trends, emerging use cases, emerging technologies, emerging customer needs, and so on and so forth. And this research activity is leveraged by Workato in different ways. For example, the product organization, I speak very frequently with the product organization to help them identify that product direction, what is important, what is not important, priorities, new opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. So from my vantage point, I say, hey, Bhagat, who is the head of engineering, Bhagat, have you thought about this? Because I see an opportunity there, or maybe there is a pent-up demand for this type of capabilities and so on. The second thing is, of course, thought leadership. So the webinars that you were mentioning earlier, the coffee webinars, they're not Workato specific. I'm not promoting Workato technology. I mean, I'm not the best person to do this. Plenty of salespeople and marketing people who can do a much better job. So, but what concerns me is to transfer to the industry all my research findings, because one thing I strongly believe is that integration technology, automation technology is strategic for organization. In many, many cases, people think about integration as a necessary evil. I need, to connect SAP with Salesforce, with this, maybe with OpenAI and Snowflake. Yeah. How do I do that? I heard somewhere that there is technology. Okay, fine. Which is not the right way of thinking about integration, right? So in my market education, my primary goal is really to make people understand that in order to stay in business, in order to be effective, in order to be agile, in order to be able to innovate, et cetera, they must have an integration automation strategy, right? And of course, this has multiple aspects, technology aspect, but also organizational aspect, delivery model aspect, et cetera. I speak often with clients, prospects, partners, of course, because I want to know what they think, and I want to share what I do, what my findings are with them. So that's basically my job.
Last couple of questions. One is, because you mentioned partners in the context of integration and all that, what do you see as the scope for SIs in the agentic world? I mean, because the key focus of agents is simplicity, simplifying your processes, making sure that you can autonomize a lot of things, give it to the agents and let them run with it and all that. Do you see SIs having a bigger role to play going forward, or is it more?
Yes, but they have to change their focus, right? Let's face it. For the many SIs business model is to sell you people. They have thousands of people sitting on the bench, and they want them to work, right? But with low code and iPaaS and AI, et cetera, there will be less and less need for coders, people developing stuff. Whereas I believe that organization will need a lot of help.
Mm.
More if you want from a consulting point of view, in terms of how do I design my integration architecture? How do I design my governance model? How do I design my delivery model? Et cetera, right? On one end. On the other end, one of the most commonly asked questions to me are, oh, I get this integration thing, whether regular or agentic, doesn't matter, but how can I use it?
Mm. Mm.
What are the business case? What is the business case? How can I justify investments in this technology, et cetera, right? So I think that organization, they need a lot of help from system integrator, consulting company, et cetera, in terms of helping organizations essentially manifest, express the business value of integration and automation, agentic, et cetera, right? And finally, I will say vertical expertise.
Ah.
It's important. What is an agent? How to use agents in banking? To do what? Loan origination? I don't know. How do you use agents in insurance companies? How do you use agents in telcos, et cetera, et cetera? So this is, and nobody knows, sincerely, right? The industry is still climbing the learning curve. But the system integrators, the consulting companies, et cetera, which are able to build a credible story in terms of how to use these technologies in the verticals, they're going to have an edge versus the horizontal, tell me what you want and I can do it for you kind of approach. Yeah.
I think that's a very key point, because in working, or at least seeing all the different agentic solutions out there and all that, the most common pattern that I see is, okay, here's a text box where you can write your entire standard operating procedure of what this particular role does, whether it's like a mortgage processing clerk or a banking clerk or whoever. They kind of document, here's how I would process mortgages or loans and things like that. They kind of document all that. And then they think the agent will automatically completely understand and go work with it, right? But there is actually a step behind the scenes, which is the integration part, which is what we spoke about for the last half hour. There is a real critical need of knowing which systems to access, which actions to specifically
which data are available,
is the data available, all that. So everything, right? I feel you hit the nail on the head with the whole SI conversation as well, that there is a different level of expertise that is needed, the vertical expertise, the real systems expertise, which specific integration systems to actually access, which APIs to even access and so forth. And that is still not going away, in my opinion, unless something radically changes with all the innovations that we're going to be seeing in the next 6 months or so. So I think that kind of brings it full circle with how we spoke about the different aspects of integration with automation and composition and how it all flows together. Massimo, this has been a phenomenal conversation. I mean, this is really good. I'll ask you one last thing, because I feel tempted to ask you this. You always been like a visionary guy. You see the future very well. What is the bigger opportunity space here across agentic applications? Have you seen something that people haven't been talking about, or something that they should be working on, or haven't seen much importance given yet? Where's the big opportunity space that agentic things need to be?
Dinesh, I wish I know.
You don't
If
have
I
the
knew, I
magic
would
wand either.
probably be here. I would probably be running my startup company. Sincerely, I do not know, right? In the sense that theoretical, the opportunities are huge, immense. But I think, I've been around for a long time.
Yeah.
And in most cases, what determined the success of a technology was the killer application. Right? You remember this expression? What was the killer application for the personal computer? It was the spreadsheet.
Spreadsheet,
Right?
yeah.
The spreadsheet. That was the killer application for the personal computer. And we can go on and on and on and on. So what is the killer application for agents? The first one who figure it out is going to be the next Google or the next Facebook, I guess. Right?
Yeah.
let's say that if we use agents to do the same things that we already do, okay, it's an improvement from an efficiency standpoint, but it's not going to change the world, right? I think that the killer application for agents is going to be for agent and agentic orchestration, etc. Are going to be applications which allow us to do things that we could not do beforehand, or at least we could not do it for a reasonable amount of money and for a
Right.
reasonable amount of time. Yeah. But if I find out, I will let you know.
Very nice. Massimo, thank you so much for a great conversation. Really love this
Thank you,
episode.
Dinesh.
Fantastic
Thank you.
insights. I'm hoping that the audience, gets to hear all your insights. And there's like so much that we are going to be seeing in the next 6 months to a year.
Yeah.
Even innovations are happening at a rapid pace, and people like you need to have the megaphone right now to talk about these things. So thank you so much for
Thank you, Dinesh, for inviting me, and good luck for your new company.
well, it's 2 years old now, so we're coming up on the
Oh, well,
anniversary.
it's still new.
It is still new. Thank you,
Thank you.
Massimo. Well,
Thank you, Dinesh. Thank you.